Hello and welcome to The Big Fight. Once again this week, there was a murder case that really riveted the entire nation, and all headlines seem to be around that one case. But here on The Big Fight, we're going to partly take a look at that case, but also look at some of the broader issues around it. Number one, what is it saying about morality and what is happening in Indian society? That set of questions. Whether there are too many media trials, that's the second set of questions that's coming up. But I also want to turn our focus to something else, which is a lot of these big, high-profile cases become the only subject of conversation for 10 days, 15 days, 20 days. And then what happens when the cameras are switched off and all attention goes away? Is justice eventually done? Was justice done in some of the other cases that we have seen in the past, whether it is Nirbhay or the Arushi case or Nithari or many cases? We'll take a look at all of those as we go forward. But let me start by welcoming all of our guests. It's great to have with us Satish Manishinde, one of our top criminal lawyers. Wonderful to have you here with us. Shivam Bij, a blogger who's been writing about lots of this. Dilip Cherian's with us as well right here, image consultant. And the Mukerjeas certainly need a lot of image consulting right now, one way or the other. Dr. Pulkit Sharma, psychologist, psychoanalytic therapist, can tell us about some of the psychology of what is playing out in this and in other cases. Shaina NC joining us from Mumbai to tell us what she thinks is happening in society. Advaita Kala is joining us as well from elsewhere in Delhi. And finally, Mrinalini Deshmukh, one of the country's top divorce lawyers, who actually was Indrani Mukerjea's lawyer during her court battle with her ex-husband and now co-accused Sanjeev Khanna. Thank you all so much for being with us. Mrinalini, why don't I start off with you before I come to all those broader issues that I was talking about. Are you somewhat bemused, having been Indrani's lawyer during that court battle, to now find her as a co-accused along with Sanjeev Khanna and both being accused of murdering Indrani's daughter? And by the way, at that time, did you even know she had a daughter? Were you one of those who felt she had a sister?
Yeah. No, well, my role was a very limited role as far as the divorce petition was concerned, because she was seeking some legal advice on the jurisdictional issues, on how this process goes on. And obviously she had visited my chambers along with Peter, who had kind of found out about me as a lawyer to help her out, because she was pretty new to Mumbai. But having said this, yes, does it? I mean, it really shocked when I read about it, and when the journalist told me, I think 2 nights back, when they called up and they said that this is what the whole thing is, it was completely, I was taken by shock. I never ever thought that such a thing would have happened. The couple looked so much in love, that is Peter and Indrani, and he was trying to help her out from a marriage which was a very I would put it that way, she was very unhappy in that marriage. And I believe, if my memory serves me right, because this is around 2001, 2002, and I believe that he was the one who was not willing to give her divorce. I'm talking about Mrs. Sanjeev Khanna. And they wanted to know what are the rights and what are the ways to go about it. And now that he is a co-accused, I guess truth is stranger than fiction. That's where it is.
Not happy, bitter sort of a divorce. How then does he become a co-accused along with her? Why would she turn to him to murder her daughter?
I mean, these are of course speculations, as we all know that the investigation is going on, and there are always ways and means of finding out what the truth is. But prima facie, based on what the police investigation or the report is, if that is what the whole situation is, based on the driver's testimony, then if it's not 100% true, there has to be some truth into the matter. And truly it baffles me, because surely there was not, and there was an issue of the child custody also then, Vidhi, because she was concerned whether, she would have rights of custody and so on and so forth. So I think from that point of view, yes, both of them being co-accused, really, really, really I don't know what to say about it.
Satish, your take specifically on everything that you've read so far or heard about so far?
Well, here is a case which has very complicated issues, very complicated facts.
You can say that again. And by the way, if social media is to be believed, there are about a dozen other complications that are still to come to light.
So we are in the hands of a senior police officer, Mr. Rakesh Maria, who is one of the best investigators in the country. And I think the police should be allowed to investigate the case without much interference from the media and society and speculations and the newspapers that we keep reading. And I've been seeing for the last 2 days that the media has overshot itself. A large number of channels, to outbeat each other, are speculating a large number of stories and discussing various issues, which almost tell me that they already been proven guilty and they're likely to just face some punishment.
That's unfortunately what happens in media
which
trials.
is very unfair on the police machinery, on Sheena, because she has been defamed.
We will come to this in a couple of minutes, because this is not the first time this is happening. You've had this thing happening repeatedly, time after time. Police also leaks it, so it's become like a feeding frenzy.
May have leaked it.
It's a feeding frenzy, right? The media is coming out with stuff, police leaking some stories. We saw this happening earlier. We saw this happening at the time of the Arushi murder case, number of other cases. This tends to happen. There will be a flip side to that they'll say, okay, the media is making sure that things aren't being hushed up. But then we'll take a look at it.
As we have it today, we have a murder case where the police goofed up. In such a manner that Rahul, who is supposed to have gone to the police station on the next day to report a missing case at Khar police station, was not even given a proper hearing. He went to the Worli police station. Even at the Worli police station, all that the officer did was to call Indrani and ask her about her daughter or sister's whereabouts. And she is supposed to have said that she's gone to the US. All that the officer could have done was contact the immigration authorities, find out if she has actually left the country. If they want to find out if a criminal has left, they find it out in no time. Why was it not done in this case? Those two police stations must answer.
And this is you're talking about at the time of the murder?
Yeah, at the time of the murder. And after the body was discovered at Raigad, the local police station, apart from getting a scientific analysis done of the remains, they have done nothing in this case.
So
they did not even contact other police stations to find out.
So
if
a missing person in such a high-profile case, if this is the way that original investigation is,
you can imagine what will happen to a common man.
You can imagine what's going to happen to a common man. Absolutely, Advaita, your take on this particular case, and then before we come to the broader issues that Satish was just talking about.
I think once again, I think you put it aptly when you said the feeding frenzy has begun. I think I would go one way and say that, the Mumbai police has been good that they went ahead and made their arrests and kept this out of the media glare to that point. Because you can imagine if people had got wind of the fact that she was under investigation or something untoward had happened to her daughter who has been missing now for 3 years. So I think you can well imagine how that would have taken off and where the investigation would have, or how the investigation would have proceeded. So in that context, I do commend the Mumbai police for having had the foresight of keeping this under wraps till they got their persons of interest. And now, of course, it's a free-for-all, as we said. And what I do find disturbing, and I think it was Mr. Shinde who said this earlier, is really the kind of defamation that is ongoing right now. We've seen this before. We've seen it happen with a murdered 14-year-old teen, when all kinds of aspersions were cast on her character, on the possible reasons and the motives for why she was killed. And we're seeing a similar sort of thing play out with another young woman. And I personally find that very disturbing, and I would go so far as to say misogynistic as well.
Okay. Are you somewhat surprised, Advaita, to find the police commissioner? So I think Satish Shinde said that there are big question marks as to what happened 3 years ago when this was first reported. Are you somewhat surprised to find the police commissioner himself taking charge of the interrogation, being out there? Or is that also understandable to your mind, to make sure that some of the goof-ups you've seen in the past are not repeated?
I think it absolutely makes sense. I think this was going to be a high-profile case once it got out into the public. So, and I also think for him to take it on means there is steady ground on which he's standing. I mean, you have to remember this all began with a tip-off. And subsequently, there was an investigation where they gathered a lot of evidence together to get to a point to make an arrest. So I definitely think he's on somewhat firm ground, even if he doesn't have a confession. And also, I think we cannot negate the fact, the aspect of a class bias. When you're dealing with the administration, when you're dealing with the police in some measure, how seriously an interrogation process is taken does have an element of class associated to it, and I don't think we can turn away from that, and that to a certain extent explains his involvement as well in direct interrogation.
Okay. Dilip Cherian.
You know, there is a steady deterioration in terms of family values, in terms of husband-wife relationships. I mean, it must be a bizarre relationship where a husband has never met either the in-laws or any part of the family, and then gets foisted by one thing saying children, then says sister and brother. There seems to be many levels of unspoken qualities of the new society. But the most fundamental position of the new society is the role of money. And for some reason, nobody is willing to talk about the money trail. And there is that which will come out.
So
which
you think there's a very strong money element in all of this, which has not yet come out?
Inevitably, at some stage, that story is going to come out. And when it plays out, a lot more in terms of motive and the fact that we are in a society today, to answer your basic question, that we are in a society today where power, pelf, and paisa are the three most important factors, which in some senses are driving everybody's greed and virtually every action.
Okay, I'm going to come back to that and see what were really some of the motives out here. Sheena, do you agree with what Dilip is saying, that what's happening and why there's so much focus in this is the deterioration of society and family values, and that is something that we are seeing happening across the board, and that's what we seem to be seeing in case after case, which is why there's so much interest around it. I guess the counter view to that would be, if it's as common as all that, maybe it wouldn't be making the headlines.
No, I think I completely agree with your assessment that it's not just a deterioration of family values, but it's also a deterioration of everyone who is accepting of the fact or kind of terming Indrani as some kind of charming woman who was very ambitious, who was very arrogant. I think this is not the way to assess this case. One has heard of Kalyug, and this is Kalyug at its worst. This story has filth, sleaze, debauchery all packed into like a horror fiction story. And if at all, the only hero in this entire episode is the police. And contrary to what Satish Manishinde said, you cannot draw parallels to say what did the police do in Raigad or why did they entertain a complaint or not. Please understand the facts of the case, that despite having a serious complainant where nobody said Sheena was missing, despite that, it is the same Mumbai police that we constantly, kind of criticize on multiple levels, that sorts a case and solves it so beautifully 3.5 years down with no systematic failure, with nabbing Indrani moment she comes to Mumbai without anyone getting a whiff of it, and having their evidence so watertight that now after the revelations that Mr. Rakesh Maria gave out this morning, even the fact that they will be able to conduct DNA tests to prove and to have conclusive evidence to show that Indrani Mukerjea is not some socialite who needs to be taken lightly, to suggest she had some complicated thought pattern, but to treat her as a hardcore criminal who has committed the most gruesome act, and something that society at large needs to ostracize.
Sheena says this shows you just how sordid society is and how sordid the people involved in this are, but not that it has some broad, that the police actually are the heroes in this.
Sheena is right that police must be given a shabashi. But what was happening for the last 3 years?
Sheena?
It was lucky that Mr. Maria got a tip off now.
Nobody said, nobody from the family pursued the case, nobody filed a missing complaint. Despite that, you have the Mumbai police 3.5 years down the line cracking this case with no loopholes and
here
no
we have a family
suggestions of question marks. So in that sense,
here we have a family where the mother itself is involved. We have Peter who says that he didn't know whether she was the sister or the daughter. We have a boyfriend who did not follow up thereafter. We have the brother sitting in Guwahati who was told that his sister is in the US for the last 3 years and he had no contact with her.
Yeah.
Surely the police must have realized that there is more to it than meets eye, because why is it that somebody who has gone abroad can't be, detected for the last 3 years? Some photographs,
but frankly, I have to say, if no member of the family is complaining for 3 years, it's a bit unfair to go to the police who should have kept on following it up. True. When the boyfriend didn't follow it up, the brother didn't follow it up, obviously the mother didn't follow it up, the father, nobody followed it up. to expect the police to have been following it up for 3 years, maybe just a little unkind.
I'm not trying to be unkind, but police got the information 3 years back.
Okay.
They got a body which was discovered at Raigad. The least that they could have done was find out where did the suitcase emanate from, where did the body belong to, where did they at all contact any of the police stations in the state to find out if some missing person has been done away with.
You see,
Is this how we are living in this country?
Shiva.
One point here is when the police found the body, they did nothing about it. But when they got a tip off that it involves high profile people, we see a high profile investigation with so many people. Is there a class bias even with the police when poor people go and say somebody is missing? We saw this in Nithari. The police does nothing about it. But when the case becomes high profile, the police and the media and society alike is very interested in solving the case.
But that's, something, I think you're right. And again, as I'm saying, look at the amount of focus and attention that there is on this and some of the other cases. The fact of the matter are that these are so-called, in inverted commas, high society, cases or middle class cases at any rate, which seem to get attention. I'm sure of far worse crimes happen and far worse, incidents happen outside in the world, which are outside so-called high society. Doesn't get that much attention.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I think that if these high-profile cases, the kind of attention they get, if this kind of attention were to be given to cases that are not high-profile, probably we'll have better policing out there.
Yeah.
Also there's this question of the deafening digital silence. Meaning, in this day and age, a brother and a sister who have been close for the last 20 years or 15 years or whatever it is, cannot just take into account that sisters vanished into America. They must be on Facebook together. They must be on something. There's almost.
He says the Facebook account got deactivated. Yeah. I mean, the point here is. I mean,
the interesting thing I think he's trying to make it that nobody was able to figure out for 3 years that she's missing.
What part of the answer that we got? Part of the answer we got to that so far is that Indrani managed to bluff everybody into thinking that she's gone to US and she doesn't want to talk to you. Now, I don't know how sort of good an answer that is, but that's the answer we've got so far. I think.
All right. Can you help us with a because frankly, it's probably going to need all of us as audiences lots of psychotherapy to get our heads around everything that's happened so far.
Right.
Forget about the people concerned.
Right.
What do you make of the psychology of all that's happened?
I think it is something that we have been seeing. I have been seeing this gradually shaping up, and I'd like to just briefly take you through the process of how this happens and how we can understand it. I think one hallmark of the times we are living in is loneliness. So everyone, right from the beginning these days, if you look, right when one is a small child, one is left alone with a lot of resources and with a lot of things to do. But there's a lack of emotional availability of people. So what typically happens over there is that one is free to go into all directions of the mind, good and bad, and one does not have a good sense of what to choose. Secondly, one is somewhere also starts feeling very lonely and sad, and that slowly converts into anger. So it builds this typical personality that we call, the narcissistic element in the personality, where the person grows up to be someone that they start treating people and human beings as objects who can fulfill their needs and wants. That this whole thing about,
Are you talking about Indrani in this case?
Yes, I am.
Grew up lonely.
Yeah.
And then became the person you're talking about.
Because I was also very struck by this fact that, if Sheena was really her daughter, she had just left these two children with the grandparents, to be just, taken care of. Whatever the circumstances may be, but I think that once you have a child, it is expected to be emotionally invested in the child,
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that then this leads to this particular typical personality pattern, where then the person, and I have had cases like this who would talk about their fathers, their mothers, their sisters or brothers or boyfriends or husbands as hindrances in their life, and hindrances that they wish should not be there.
Okay.
Yeah.